looks like a Black Widow film is finally here, and even after, well, spoiler alert, her untimely death in Avengers Endgame, we finally get a standalone MCU story for this iconic character that I've wanted to see for a long time, and this one they chose to set it in between Civil War and Avengers Infinity War, which I thought was the perfect place to put this story, because she's still on the run from the government after what happened in that film, and yeah, I was really looking forward to this movie, and even though it is 5 years too late, I guess we have it now, and I'm at least happy that we do get this movie to see. It wasn't just pushed back release dates because of 2020, but this movie definitely should have released after Captain America Civil War, and this continues to be pushed back, so my anticipation for this movie has kept building up for a long, long time, and I'm finally glad it's here. And so let's talk about it. This movie follows Natasha in the events after Captain America Civil War, and follows her while still on the run from the government. This time she goes on a little side path, confronting the darker ledgers of her past that leads to sort of an unlikely family reunion between her and some new characters this film introduced. All characters I really, really enjoyed. Now, I won't be getting into spoilers with this review, but I have always anticipated getting a Black Widow movie, and I was hoping that this movie would give us more insight into this character and finally give her the spotlight she deserves in her own film. And what I really liked most about this film was its core lead of characters and the strange family-like situation they share, and it made for a good amount of emotional drama and some really fun humour spread in between the action sequences. And to me, the action, even though it was all well shot and the action was very entertaining, as it was very good, it was this core family dynamic that was the most entertaining part of the movie, because family's always been an important part of Natasha's character. She saw family in the Avengers, and she always spoke about how she never really knew her real ones, so seeing this sort of fake spy family that had to be created undercover is actually really, really enjoyable concept, and I like seeing them reunite and going against the organization that they once worked for to keep that intact. I really, really enjoyed that storyline, and I thought each of the new characters it introduced, with Rachel Weisz, Florence Pugh, and David Harbour, all of their characters I really loved, and I cannot wait to see more of them in the future, and I thought their dynamic together was really great.
Here's what's gonna happen.
Natasha, don't slouch.
I'm not slouching.
You're going to get a back hunch.
Listen to your mother.
Oh my God, this.
Up. Listen.
All right, enough. All of you.
I didn't say anything. That's not fair.
And actually quite emotional in some places, and actually really funny in some places as well, and I'd love to see more of those characters, and it definitely sets up to see more of those characters in the future, and even if Natasha isn't there along with them, I still want to see what they have to do. And I really enjoyed seeing them on screen together, and they were all great performances. And speaking of Black Widow herself, they wouldn't really be able to develop this character as much as the other characters in the film, unfortunately, but there is still a great amount that she does with this role, and she's obviously great as this character once again. And I thought that they did a lot to the character in this film that I wanted them to do, especially explore more of the character's overall past, and it does add a bit to her overall legacy as a character. And parts of the origin, they do explore how she became into the person we see her as in the MCU movies, and it was interesting for the most part to see where she came from, and to see the people that raised her and how she was raised and who she became, who she was, and that came into play right off the bat in the extremely exciting opening sequence. And I thought the opening credits scene was fantastic. The entire opening of this movie was absolutely brilliant from top to bottom, and it really got me excited to see this movie. It was a very, very dark opening, and it generally gave me chills. This opening sequence really started the film off to a brisk pace, and I loved it. It was also the first MCU film to use opening credits, not ending credits, and I really enjoyed that, seeing that sort of change of pace as we move into the next sort of phase of the MCU, and I thought this movie immediately started like something different. I love the song choices it used. I actually really liked the score from Lon Wolf, really, really good musical score, and I really, really enjoyed the opening of this film, and it continued to be quite dramatic and very action-packed for the rest of the runtime in its story. The story was fairly simple, even if it doesn't really get started until about 40 minutes in. I really, really enjoyed seeing what this plot had to do, and when it reached the second act, I was really, really enjoying it as well. To me, my biggest issue with this film was probably the third act. I really did not like the more superhero-y action. There were some good twists within the story that they did, and all the storytelling was very, very interesting, and how each character's arc sort of came into play. But the final act to me felt very CGI heavy. Some of the CGI explosions didn't even look that good. A lot of the action to me, even though it was entertaining, wasn't as well constructed as it could have been. All the action between the start of the movie I really loved, but the action at the end, the entire third act, just dragged it down a little bit for me, and mainly that was due to the villains. I thought Taskmaster was fine, But the main villain I thought was atrocious, one of the worst MCU villains I've ever seen, and he really tanked a lot of the film for me. And a lot of what his character had to do dealt with sort of things we've heard about Natasha's character in the past and things she's done, and it just wasn't really that compelling because it didn't really set it up in an interesting way. I liked how it set up its own story, I liked how it set up these characters, but not necessarily the story around them. And I thought they could have done a lot more with the more action side of the movie and maybe made something more scaled when it came to the ending. It just felt like very Marvel-y all of a sudden when the rest of the movie was very grounded. It felt very much like The Winter Soldier, and even The Winter Soldier has its big bombastic action sequences. But to me, what Black Widow doesn't really stick with its own style when it gets to the end of the film, and it was sort of an issue for me. And also, this film is kind of hurt and harmed in a way for not releasing when it was originally set. And I think it sort of harms the film as a result, knowing that this core of characters and knowing that this story isn't going to be expanded upon anymore, knowing what happens and what will eventually happen to the Black Widow character, it sort of makes a lot of this movie sort of feel like a little weak in comparison, seeing that even though we are going to see these characters again, we're not going to see Natasha interact with them. And some of the sets up of development with Natasha's character they set up at the start of this film doesn't really come into play in this movie, so it's obviously never going to come into play ever, because this is the last time we see this character. And even though I loved seeing this character one last time, it was kind of disappointing to me that they introduced things about this character that could have been developed upon if this movie came out earlier. And I still really enjoyed the movie, and I still had a great time watching it, and I'm so happy we do have a Black Widow movie now. But there were a lot of story things in the movie that just didn't really work for me, even though most of the movie I generally really enjoyed, and all of the slower moments were the highlight of the movie. The action was great, the pacing moved very quickly, and I thought the direction was also pretty solid. And the story mainly moved pretty well around the characters, but it was the family aspect. It was these characters to me that kept the movie going, even with a terrible villain. All the leads were excellent. Overall, even though I do have a few more issues with this film I really wish I didn't have, and it not being quite as effective from releasing too late in the timeline of the MCU, it was still good enough to make me satisfied with the Black Widow movie we eventually got. I loved all the character dynamics between our leads, and it was great to see the Black Widow character on screen one last time, and I do think that this film was a necessary inclusion for the MCU, but maybe it did come out a bit too late. But putting that aside, I'm happy we finally have this movie, and when I do go back and rewatch the MCU, or altogether, I will just watch this in place of where it's set, and I guess better late than never. So I'm going to give Black Widow a B+. I'm also going to give the movie around a 75%. I really enjoyed this movie, and that score could change when I rewatch it, and I am really happy we finally have a Black Widow movie, and I'm happy it's good. So let me know what you thought of the Black Widow in the comments down below. I also have a Letterboxd linked in the description, so if you want to check out some more of my thoughts on other movies on there, then you can check that out. And of course, thanks for watching, and goodbye.